Hi, welcome to What's the Book About? This is part 2 of a look at Rick Cook's Wizardry series. Now be warned, there will be some spoilers, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. There are a lot of non-human sentient life forms in this series, but there are only 3 that are critical and important for the series as a whole. The first are the elves, and eventually the elves, the dark version of the elves. They're mostly represented by Duke Elric. The elves are the old world. They're powerful and magical and ancient and mysterious, and they're cyclical. They follow the same pattern over and over again, except for Duke Elric. He's powerful enough and smart enough to realize that they're going around in circles, and the elves are bound and determined to either have dominion over the world or destroy it if they can't. And it's a risk that he can't accept. And it subtly suggests that he's the one that convinces Petrius to pull Wiz from our world into his. Now, the Duke, by doing this, by backing the humans, he managed to do what none of his people have ever been able to do: lock the elves out of this universe and save them. It's not without cost, and it actually explains why these disinterested elves and their Duke would actually suddenly take an interest in human affairs. The second most important non-human intelligence is the dragons. Now, in the first few books, we only ever see dragons as cavalry mounts, and we're told they're young dragons and they're very animalistic. It's not till the 4th book that we learn that there's a reason they only use young dragons and that they behave animalistic. It's because young dragons aren't sentient. It's not until they achieve kind of like teenagerhood, where they mature, that suddenly they achieve sentience, and all their hidden memories, and like it's implied they have a racial memory of skills, are suddenly open to them, and everything that they've experienced or watched or seen while they were young, they absorb subtly, and then they suddenly understand it later. It's like they suddenly have an entire epiphany about their entire existence, and they become sentient and extremely powerful. And because of this, once they achieve sentience, they leave the human lands and they have their own area, and it's not surprising considering that they're loners, so it's not a lot of dragons, not a lot of them manage to survive to sentience, but the ones that actually end up as cavalry mounts have a much higher success rate. So when the 4th book comes around and you find out that the dragon's worm realizes that the dragons have a problem with humans, he understands the nature of it because he's been around humans and have been around the modern magic as it started. Now, the dragons in this series represent the wizards. They're the old school magic, and just like Petrius was for the humans, Worm is for the dragons. He's someone who sees the problem coming down the road and decides to fix it before it becomes too late. And of course, it naturally would involve Wiz, the same guy who helped the humans, is going to help the dragons. Lastly, the 3rd most important non-human intelligence are the demons. You see, magic, once it's a certain level of complexity, actually manifests a physical form. Now, human wizards, when they cast spells, once those spells achieve at same level of complexity, actually achieve a physical form that's influenced by the wizard's mentality and what he's thinking, what he's feeling about the magic. And the reason they're called demons is, well, in this world, humans are very low on the food chain, higher than animals, but there's so many more things that are higher than them that eat humans, and nearly all of them are magical. So it's not surprising that human wizards, once they learn to start practicing and using magic, that their mental image will be tinged by their fears of the things that have eaten and hunted them, the magical creatures. So when they create spells that are more complex, they pop out demons. And when Wiz and the programmers from our world are dropped into this world, it's actually reflected in how they create magic and what their demons look like. They're far more benign, comical even sometimes, and in the second book there's actually one that's pornographic in nature, deliberately so. And these programmers do something that the normal wizards of this world never thought to do. They actually create and design the look of what the demons come out to be. They actually, in the second book, the programmers end up creating a little fight simulator, and instead of creating images, the actual programming code, the magical spell, creates the look. So they create, fighter jets. And this is something none of the wizards at the time would have ever thought to try. And they're actually much more controllable with this new level of magic, which is why these programmers end up becoming more powerful and more influential. And like I said, these demons are the magic of the world. It's not a metaphor, they really are. Now there is one last race, fourth race, but they're not really important so much to the story. They are a background, the dwarves. They appear in just a couple novels, and they're more secondary characters, and there's a couple mentions of other races like goblins and orcs and stuff, but you only see them in little bits. They're minor characters and they don't really have an effect on the series as a whole, so they're not on my top 3 lists of important non-human sentient life forms. Okay, so humor dominates this series. Next to adventure, it's the most used tool in the author's toolkit. There are running gags, jokes aplenty, but the author never loses sight of the narrative and the story he's trying to tell. The humor is always the icing on the cake. A great example are the Dwarven Assassins and their leader, Glandrug. Now, the Dwarven Assassins are introduced as comic relief, and their antics are hilarious and funny, and they all actually subtly serve to drive the plot of that particular story to get Wiz more involved in the world, and they become useful in the finale. And when Glandrug eventually returns for the 5th and final book, his part in the quest team is mostly comic relief, but again, he's essential and he's a plot point because it gets the Dwarven King involved in the final battle. It ups the stakes of the battle, ups the battle scenes, and it serves to drive the plot that much farther and give it that much bigger of a scope. And this is typical of the author, to use humor subtly on the surface, but always driving the plot forward. Always servicing the story and the narrative with his humor. This series as a whole is actually an adventure series. Each book is a different style or type of adventure story. Wizard's Bane, the first book, is the foreign adventure story with a romantic comedy subplot. Wizardry Compiled is a prison break with a culture clash subplot with the other programmers. Wizardry Cursed is the evil twin plot with a bumbling assassin subplot. Wizardry Consulted is the con man adventure story. Wizardry Quested is naturally a dungeon crawl adventure story with returning heroes subplot. As a whole, this series is a story of one man, one idea, changing an entire world. You get to see this simple adventure, simple idea, just ballooning out, changing the world, adding humor and depth and character development and growth without ever actually falling into the trap of becoming a parody of the fantasy genre. Which is immensely helped because the author, again, He ties his humor to the characters, the people, rather than to the setting or the style. And you always end up caring about what the adventurers care about, what they're seeking, what their goal is. You never lose the tension. There's moments of comic relief so the tension doesn't crack and destroy the story, but it keeps it moving. In the end, I have to give the series actually 4 out of 4 stars. The 4th book is a little weak, but it does stand on its own. Sadly, the series does end with the 5th book, and there's no real supplementary material. There was a potential of a 6th book, but it never came to be. However, the author does have 2 other independent stories. Limbo System, a sci-fi adventure, and Mall Purchase Night, a urban fantasy story. I may get around to doing a critique or review on them later, but suffice it to say, I would definitely recommend checking them out if you can. Till next time, have a good one.